There is a certain kind of darkness, not the loud kind, not the kind that jumps at you, but the kind that lingers, the kind that stays with you long after the screen goes black. You see it in certain anime, in quiet, violent frames, in characters who don't feel like heroes, in words that feel just a little too cruel to be fiction. And if you follow that feeling, if you trace it back far enough, you would find yourself standing in the work of one man. A man whose name most people don't know, but whose influence is everywhere. Yoshiaki Kawajiri. In today's video, I want to tell you a story much more important than fame. The story of something quieter, something harder to see. This is the story of how a man changed anime forever and became invisible.
Sensei!
Before Kawajiri, before the violence, before the shadows, anime was different. Not lesser, just safer. Stories were clearer, and heroes were easier to understand. And for the most part, the world of animation knew exactly what it was supposed to be. But underneath that surface, something was changing. A new kind of artist was emerging. The kind that was not interested in comfort or rules. Artists who wanted to push things further. We are talking about directors such as Rintaro, Katsuhiro Otomo, or Mamoru Oshii. And somewhere in that shift was Kawajiri. Yoshiaki Kawajiri got his start at the animation trenches, entering the industry in the early 1970s, a time when anime was still dominated by the TV-focused styles of Osamu Tezuka and Toei Doga. He worked at Madhouse, one of the few studios at the time that dared to push artistic boundaries. Kawajiri's early works, like Lensman in 1984 and his segment in Neo Tokyo in 1987, showed hints of what was to come. You could already see what would become his signature style, dynamic angles and a fascination with shadows. He didn't arrive with noise, he didn't have a dramatic entrance or instant recognition, just work. Long hours, endless drawings, learning how movement feels, but also how silence can be just as powerful as action. The kind of work most people never see, the kind of work that builds everything but gets none of the credit. Kawajiri wasn't even trying to be famous, he was simply paying attention, watching, absorbing, and slowly developing something different. Not louder, but sharper and more deliberate. The Running Man was his true coming out party, visually stunning and thematically bleak. It established many of Kawajiri's signatures: erotic horror, a nihilistic tone, and men with more muscles than emotions. This was the anime equivalent of a Jim Cameron movie, oiled up, overclocked, and designed to kick you in the face. And that's the thing with Kawajiri, he's not a subtle director, but that's also kind of the point. His films move like freight train. You are in, you are confused, and then someone loses a limb. Enter Wicked City. In 1987, a little film called Wicked City was released, and suddenly something felt different. Not just in the story, but in the feeling. The tone was something completely unexpected for an anime. Wicked City follows a secret agent tasked with protecting a fragile peace treaty between the human world and an hidden realm of demons. But as the mission unfolds, that line between the two worlds begins to blur, turning the assignment into something far more violent, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. This movie was animation not trying to entertain you at all. It didn't care if you were comfortable. It didn't explain itself. It didn't soften its edges. It simply existed. Dark, violent, unapologetically edgy. But there's something else in Wicked City, something that's harder to ignore. It's the way it treats its female characters. They are powerful in a way, but also exposed, vulnerable, often caught in the violence rather than controlling it. And I won't lie, it's uncomfortable at times. Not by accident, but by design. This was anime stepping into adulthood, and Kawajiri was one of the ones leading it there. Not everyone understood it, but people who did never forgot it. Then Kawajiri made Ninja Scroll. By the time Ninja Scroll arrived, Kawajiri wasn't experimenting anymore. He knew exactly what he was doing, and it shows in every frame. Ninja Scroll follows a wandering swordsman forced in a deadly conspiracy involving a group of supernatural warriors threatening the country. And as he's pulled deeper into the conflict, survival becomes less about winning and more about enduring a world that seems determined to break him. Ninja Scroll hit like a kunai to the gut, a samurai epic soaked in mythology and body horror. It was everything your mom didn't want you watching. However, this was more than just a story about a wandering swordsman. It was a world that felt hostile and unforgiving. The fights feel desperate rather than choreographed, like a fight for survival instead of performance. The villains are not only evil but also unnatural, and at the center of it all is a man who doesn't belong anywhere. My favorite aspect of Ninja Scroll is the fact that Jubei, its main protagonist, is just a man. Highly skilled, yeah, but just a man nonetheless. In fact, he's the only person in the story with zero supernatural advantage. But one thing about Jubei, he always finds a way to win. And looks badass while doing it. One of my favorite characters ever. And you know what? That just makes me realize that there is a loneliness in Ninja Scroll. A quiet understanding. That strength doesn't protect you from isolation. It just makes you survive it longer. Strength exists in its characters, but it's constantly tested in ways that feel uneven, especially for its women. Not just fighting to survive the world, but the way the story itself treats them. Like Kagero, the female lead in Ninja Scroll, a konoichi whose body has been turned into a weapon, poisoned to the point where even her touch can kill. She's strong and carries her own weight in a world that rarely shows mercy, yet her strength exists alongside a kind of vulnerability that feels very specific to Kawajiri's storytelling. She's navigating a world that constantly puts her in harm's way, both physically and narratively, and that tension is exactly what makes her memorable, despite her being also hypersexualized. And again, this wasn't unusual for the time. In fact, it was part of the appeal for a certain audience. Anime at this point wasn't trying to be universal, it was trying to go further than anything else. And in that sense, Ninja Scroll was a turning point. It exploded overseas. In the pre-Toonami era, it was one of the big three that defined mature anime for Western audiences, alongside Akira and Ghost in the Shell. So for many people outside of Japan, this was the moment. The first time they realized that anime could feel like this. Not like a cartoon, not like a genre, but like cinema. And then something strange happened. Kawajiri didn't become a global celebrity. His name didn't suddenly appear everywhere. But his style did. Quietly, subtly, spreading. But as anime began to travel and it reached new audiences, things were different. Not just in style, but also in perspective. The stories became broader, the characters more balanced, and slowly, the kind of edge Kawajiri built his identity on became harder to carry forward in the same way. Years later, when audiences started noticing a certain kind of action, a certain kind of movement, a certain kind of visual darkness, they realized they had seen it before. This visual intensity of Kawajiri's work became a blueprint for dark fantasy anime. You can see traces of Kawajiri in Hellsing, Claymore, Devilman Cry Baby, or even Attack on Titan. In films like Matrix, for example, where action felt stylized and almost unreal. Or in moments like the animated sequence in Kill Bill Volume 1, where violence becomes art. These are echoes. I'm not saying these guys copied Kawajiri, but his style definitely echoed in their work. It's the kind of influence that doesn't announce itself. It just becomes part of the language. In 2003, Kawajiri's style would quietly reach an even wider audience through the Animatrix, a project tied to the world of the Matrix. He directed Program, a short that strips the concept down to something intimate and brutal, a simulated training exercise that turns into a test of loyalty and choice. It's a perfect example of his strengths: controlled tension, a lingering sense that reality itself cannot quite be trusted, and most importantly, sudden violence. Even within a larger franchise, his voice remains unmistakable, quiet and just a little unsettling. But before closing the curtains on Kawajiri's influence on anime, it's crucial to mention a particular movie that, to me, is one of the most beautiful anime ever made. And of course, I'm talking about Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust. By the time we reach Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust, something had changed again. The chaos is still there, but now it's controlled, almost elegant. Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust follows a mysterious half-vampire hunter hired to retrieve a noble woman who has been taken by a powerful vampire. But as the journey unfolds, the line between rescue and choice begins to blur, turning the pursuit into something far more tragic and haunting than it first appears. The film was written in English first, tailored for the US market, and it shows.
I suggest you save your sorry ass now and leave us to travel in peace.
The pacing is more classical, the violence more stylized, and the themes more romantic. The violence here feels quieter, and every frame feels like it was meant to last forever. There is a sense of distance from the rawness of his earlier work. Not really a complete transformation, but a shift, as if the world around the film had already started moving in a different direction. In many ways, Bloodlust feels like Kawajiri growing up. Still dark, still stylish, but deeper, less about shock and more about beauty and loss. This movie is not cool just because it's dark. This is simply mastery. And yet, despite all of this, Kawajiri never became a household name. A few OVAs, a Batman Gotham Knight short, nothing major since 2008. No massive spotlight, no global fame, just the work and the people who found it. But maybe that was never the point. Some artists become famous, others become foundations. The kind of creators whose ideas spread so far that eventually people forget where they even started. Yoshiaki Kawajiri is one of those creators. Not loud, not obvious, but essential. Kawajiri didn't appear out of nowhere. The darkness was already there, simmering in the work of creators like Osamu Tezuka, who showed that animation could be more than just light and simple. In the chaos of Go Nagai, who pushed violence and shock further than most people were comfortable with. And in films like Akira, where the world itself felt like it was falling apart. But Kawajiri took all of that and made it personal. He was a bridge between old school cell animation and modern anime aesthetics. A contradiction, a visionary and a pulp merchant, a director whose work is as problematic as it is powerful. You may not have known his name before this video, but now you've seen his word, and once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. Thank you for watching.